First shots fired on Fort Sumter, South Carolina, in April 1861 signaled the start of the nation's Civil War, the war between the Union States of the North and the Confederate States of the South. General Irvin McDowell, commander of the Union troops, was not yet ready to fight. He felt that he needed more time to prepare, even though most of his troops had volunteered for just 90 days and their term of service was nearly over. On July 16th, McDowell marched his poorly prepared army into Virginia. His objective was the town of Manassas, an important railroad junction southwest of Washington. The North was much better prepared for the war than was the South. The North had more than twice as much railroad track as the South. This made the movement of troops, food, supplies quicker and easier in the North. There were also more than twice as many factories in the North, so the Union was better able to produce the guns, ammunition, shoes, and other items needed for its army. The North's economy as well balanced between farming and industry, and the North had far more money in the bank. Because most of the nation's military colleges were in the South, a majority of the nation's trained officers were Southerners, and they sided with the Confederacy. In addition, the Southern Army did not need to initiate any action to win the war. The Southerners had an advantage. They felt that they were fighting to preserve their way of life, and they believed their right to self-government. President Lincoln named General George McClellan to build and command a new army. While McClellan was involved with this task, Union forces in the West invaded the Confederacy. The most successful Union forces in the West were led by General Ulysses S. Grant. After the fall of Fort Sumter, Grant's success at organizing and training a group of Illinois volunteers caused Lincoln to promote him from colonel to general. The bloodiest battle in the war happened near an important railroad center in Tennessee and Mississippi. Union warships maintained the blockade of Virginia's coast. The Confederates, however, had developed a secret weapon to which to fight the blockade. Southerners had created a strange-looking vessel called the Merrimac. The Union wooden navy was no match for this powerful ironclad warship. Fortunately for the Union, early reports of the Confederates' work on the Merrimac had reached the Battle of Antietam became the bloodiest day of the Civil War. Union troops attacked throughout the day, suffering heavy losses. In the first 3 hours of fighting, some 12,000 soldiers from both sides were killed or wounded. Confederates retreated back into Virginia. Lincoln telegraphed McClellan, destroy the rebel army if possible. Copperheads attacked Lincoln for making war on the South. Abolitionists and others attacked him for not making the military action a war to end slavery. As the Union's battlefield casualties mounted, many Northerners began to question whether it was enough to simply restore the nation. Some, including a group in the Republican Party, thought that the Confederacy should be punished for causing so much suffering. No punishment could be worse than freeing the slaveholders' property. In the fall of 1862, as Lee retreated south from Antietam, Lincoln proclaimed that on January 1st, 1863, slaves in all areas of rebellion against the government would be free. Then, on New Year's Day, 1863, he issued the final Emancipation Proclamation. At first, there were no African Americans to join the war. After McClellan's defeats, they were then admitted. After Emancipation Proclamation, nearly 180,000 African Americans enlisted for the Union. More than half were Southern freed slaves. Because the men who worked on the farms joined the Confederate Army, there was no one to cultivate the crops, so agricultural economy diminished for the South. In the North economy, most of the industries boomed. Because there were no farms, there was not as much suffering as the South. Prison camps were set up in the North for captured Confederates. Point Lookout was one. Of the 50,000 soldiers held in the Army prison camp, who were housed in tents at the Point between 1863 and 1865, nearly 4,000 died, although this death rate of 8% was less than half the death rate among soldiers who were in the field with their own armies. The camp was originally built to hold 10,000 men. The Gettysburg Address is a speech by U.S. President Abraham Lincoln, one of the best known in American history. It was delivered by Lincoln during the American Civil War on the afternoon of Thursday, November 19, 1863, at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 4.5 months after the Union armies defeated those of the Confederacy at the Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Fredericksburg was fought December 11 through 15, 1862, in and around Fredericksburg, Virginia, between General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army of Northern Virginia and the Union Army of the Potomac, commanded by Major General Ambrose Burnside. Union casualties were more than twice as heavy as those suffered by the Confederates, resulting in a Confederate win. The Battle of Chancellorsville was a major battle of the American Civil War. It was fought from April 30th to May 6, 1863, in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, near the village of Chancellorsville. The campaign pitted Union Army Major General Joseph Hooker's Army of the Potomac against an army less than half its size, General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. Chancellorsville is known as Lee's perfect battle because his risky decision to divide his army in the presence of a much larger enemy force resulted in a significant Battle of Gettysburg was fought July 1st through 3rd, 1863, in and around the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, between Union and Confederate forces during the American Civil War. The battle involved the largest number of casualties of the entire war and is often described as the war's turning point. Union was outnumbered by Confederates on Day 1, July 1st. On Day 2, Union officer Meade called for reinforcements. Union soldiers raced to protect Little Round Top. The Confederate soldiers retreated from the hill, saving the Union army from defeat. On the third day of battle, July 3rd, fighting resumed on Culp's Hill, but the main event was a dramatic infantry assault by 12,500 Confederates against the center of the Union line, known as Pickett's Charge. The charge was repulsed by Union rifle and artillery fire, at great losses to the Confederate army. Lee led his army on a tortuous retreat back to Virginia. The Battle of Milliken's Bend, fought June 7, 1863, was part of the Vicksburg campaign of the American Civil War. In an effort to cut Grant's supply line, the Confederates attacked the Union supply area at Milliken's Bend up the Mississippi. The Milliken's Bend area, 15 miles to the northwest of Vicksburg, had until recently served as a staging area for Grant's campaign. It was a site of supply deposits and hospitals, many of which were manned and guarded by black soldiers. The Battle of Jackson, fought on May 14, 1863, seized the city of Jackson, Mississippi, cutting supply lines and opening the path to the west and the siege of Vicksburg. Union commander Ulysses S. Grant pursued the retreat of Confederate General John Pemberton and defeated his army 20 miles to the east of Vicksburg, Mississippi, leading inevitably to the siege of Vicksburg and surrender. The siege of Vicksburg was the final major military action in the Vicksburg campaign of the American Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant crossed the Mississippi River and drove the Confederate army into the defensive lines surrounding the fortress city of Vicksburg, Mississippi. Grant decided to besiege the city beginning on May 25th. With no reinforcements, supplies nearly gone, and after holding out for more than 40 days, the garrison finally surrendered on July 4th.